the narration of the progressive return and the eventual restoration of Jerusalem, people of God, as it then stood, is interesting. It intertwines the profane and the divine. Cyrus being the profane, because he didn't believe in the God of Israel as such, but what his instrument, and the divine being the instructions given directly through these prophets. We notice the great, massive actually, celebration that they had with this first Passover after the restoration. If one looks at the number of animals involved, it was something colossal. And so it went on. We know what happened. Eventually, the grace was lost because all this for which it was meant was not seen for what it was. It was taken as the fullness, and when the fullness came, it was rejected. In the hymn that we have at benediction, types and shadows have their ending for the newer writer here. Well, types and shadows are what we have here, and then when the Lamb came, no, we have enough, thank you. But it can happen to us as well. If we only knew what we had actually even here, if we had the vision of some of the mystics who have been shown beyond the veil and how many angels are present, it would make our hair stand on end. And yet, often when we're here, in the back of our mind are the important things that we have to do afterwards. Again, we're missing the point. We notice also how this king, Cyrus, was giving command, and also Darius, in such a way that the necessary things were happening physically, the money essentially, and the equipment, tribute and so on, was being diverted. And so God had his ways of using secular arms to make his will happen. And the care was something else, because actually the building was a fine building. And when we think about it, it is fitting that anything which is extra-territorial, claimed by heaven on earth, should be worthy of heaven physically. Only the best. Now here I want to quickly zoom into this theme. It's the question of the best for God. In the diary of St. Faustina, there's one passage in which, by chance, she wanders into a church that she had not seen before or visited, and she was overwhelmed by its presence of majesty and awe. Something hit her. And the Lord interiorly spoke to her, indicating this is how he, the Lord, wanted it. That the church, a church, should be such that immediately his majesty was felt and recognized. Do you know that there is one church on earth of which he himself was the architect? Does anyone know where it is?
Bethlehem.
It is. Well done, you knew.
Miriam.
Exactly, the newly canonized Miriam, Marie de Jésus crucifié. She was a Lebanese nun of the Maronite rite, and crucified or stigmatized and all the rest of it, and she had a life which was something else with regard to miracles out of this world. She died and came back and all the rest of it. And anyway, she couldn't read or write. Her signature is a cross. And yet through her, about 3 Carmels came into being. We knew where the real Emmaus is, and Bethlehem was the Lord's own doing. And why not? That's where the incarnation happened. It's worthy. And Carmel, of course, is the biblical order. It's the oldest order in a sense because it looks back to Elijah and the prophets. And so, this was his instrument. And therefore he used this illiterate nun to draw up the plans and indicate everything that he wanted. And it's interesting because there is a noble dignity and a majesty in simplicity. Little details are in themselves powerful by what they say and don't say. All the windows are such that when one looks through them, one sees what? The sky. He also gave certain concrete details as to how it was to be lived in that house, and he was fairly keen on making sure that the rule, which after all was his concrete voice box, his will of God, indicated in the page before the nuns, and therefore had to be kept. And there were certain cases where if it wasn't happening, he made it known. One thing, interestingly, which could be easily overlooked in modern-day monasticism, was something that he was extremely demanding on. Does anyone know what it is? Can you imagine what it might be?
Obedience.
Well, yes, that was there, but under that was coming all the corrections that he was giving, but there's one that concerned everyone all the time. Can you guess?
Silence.
Yes, you got it.
Silence.
It was the question of silence. And he was so demanding that he did not want the human voice to be heard in the corridors. And actually, I can tell you how important that bit is. We had the formation still in France of being able to communicate without the voice. It was done through signs or through billets, little letters, notes. Now that meant that, in fact, one did not hear the human voice. If, with permission, one had to make conversation with a superior or whatever it might be, or for confession, one had to go into a place where the voice was not heard. Now that was kind of important, because then it meant what? You had precisely what the Lord wanted there in Bethlehem, a place which was physically extraterritorial, where the only voice heard was his own. Now that applies to you. If in your car home tonight you have the instinct to make the journey shorter by one switch of a knob, you know what's going to happen. You will have RTE preaching its gospel to you, or if you don't do that, you have then, an hour of silence. Now what will happen there? Okay, you'll have your own thought, but at least you'll have perhaps this homily, this time of prayer, resonating a little in your mind and not blotted out by more words, in which, rather like the cows in the field, you will ruminate. And therefore, it'll go in and come back, and perhaps something else will come to the fore. And you will also perhaps remember this bit, that in wanting places like that on earth, that Carmel, where he reigned, perhaps you would like your car, your home, your room, your soul to be something of that, a bit of heaven that belongs to heaven and not just to the earth. Now there are consequences. He can't bear noise, and the demon loves noise. Father Michael Marr, a personal friend of mine who calls now and again, beard and all, he comes out with things like this: hell is full of noise. And it's true. The noisy soul is a great friend of the demon. And if we cannot bear noise, we're very much on the side of the demon. Now that applies to all that we do. Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich saw in vision the life of the Holy Family. And she saw that there was very little oral communication actually needed. They understood each other. She saw them smiling, and she saw the warmth. She did not actually see them laughing, but I am sure that there was a huge amount of communion there. And you people who are aware of the dynamics of relationship, I think are aware. The depth of communion happens only when there's a certain simplification going on. When a child can happily be on its mother's lap. When a boyfriend can be with the girlfriend without resort to something technical. When they're just happy to be together and relax. when a child is with his father in the car and does not have to talk all the way to school. I remember actually noticing that with Dad on the way to school in the mornings as a child. We didn't used to talk, actually. Didn't have anything to say. We were quite happy to be with each other. So it's the same with Jesus. There's a certain simplification which takes place between lovers. He likes to have us available. And we can be only semi-available if we're doing a holy hour but bombarding him with set prayers. Prayers, vocal prayers, are a structure in which prayer, communion, can take place. But the communion is the essence of it, and they can block it out if we're not careful. It's actually a sign of deep love when, after a certain point, we feel the problem of too much complication of words, and we're happy to gaze and gaze and gaze at the host, and to have a certain addiction towards the real presence. With regard to the place, I have noticed actually that it does impact. If one has a church, a chapel which is built with the suggestion that it's an auditorium or a place of human contact and encounter, that will also be something of the atmosphere which will develop in it. If one has a place which physically points towards Majesty, tendentially it will favour greatly the honour and glory of the Lord and his pride of place therein, his action. This actually I happened to read only yesterday in a message which Our Blessed Lady gave to Father Gobi, the founder of the Marian Movement of Priests. It was something that Our Lady made him aware of, that it was the desire of her Divine Son that physically he should have pride of place, that the place where he abode, the tabernacle, should be the centre immediately of attention in such a way that he was able to reign. Because being human, if that is not the case, we come in and we do a ski-whiff genuflection or a bow. We can't even see the centre. And then, of course, what is the centre? It'll be somewhere where a man is sitting. It's actually what I knew in Wales when I was growing up. If you go into a nonconformist, a Welsh Baptist, whatever it is, church, what do you see? A place where a man for an hour reigns over his congregation. The dynamic is quite different. And the quality of the celebration, which is long, remember, a whole hour or more, depends on the quality of that man. We have another dynamic. What the Lord wants is, yes, a man who will give the best, but not a man who will be the centre of attention, the man who will be giving his best in doing what? Presenting the throne of the High King, introducing unto him, communicating him, and then fading, which, by the way, is the intuition given to Ratzinger. He was insisting upon it for a long time, even before he was Pope. The 2 millennia of history which we have in common with the East are clear on that one, and it goes back to the early church. There is a continuity between the prefigured worship of the Old Testament and the beginnings of the New, in that it was understood that there was a certain sacrificial element present in our worship, and that instinctively led to facing the rising sun, or its equivalent, the cross. Now, there's also a psychological reason for that. This part now of the celebration, which we have from the Jews, the first part of the Mass is Judaic synagogal in origin, is communicative. It's based on the word, honoured, listened to, developed, and chanted. It should be celebrated. And it demands what we're doing now, eye contact, physical contact. The second part doesn't. It's a different dynamic. And there, the priest as such, in his humanity, does not exist. He is eclipsed, and he is leading to the Shekinah, the cloud of glory. And he must not get in the way or deflect the glory unto himself. A priest, for instance, who at the elevation is holding the host, the Lord himself, the center of the celebration, in front of his nose, so that also we're seeing his nose and eyes, is missing the point. If he elevates it up there, then only the Lord is seen. These are physical things which show who we're drawing the attention to. I conclude, my friends, if that is the case, nothing should be spared in creating a temple of glory for the Lord. E.g., it demands work to prepare good music. It demands work to prepare good altar servers. It demands work to put in incense, to prepare lights, candles, icons, flowers, in one word, an atmosphere which suggests angelic presence. It's easy to be functional, but the Mass is not a function, it's Mount Tabor.